There's a wound on you that's been bleeding since childhood, and no one ever thought to stitch it closed. Every time you felt the phantom vibration of a phone that hadn't buzzed, that wound opened. Every time you reread a text trying to decode hidden meaning, more blood spilled. Every time you changed your behavior because you could feel eyes on you, judging, evaluating, measuring, you handed them the knife and pointed to the softest part of yourself. Here's what they don't teach you in school, in church, in any of the places that claim to build character. Your attention is not renewable. You cannot manufacture more of it. You cannot buy it back after it's spent. Every moment you spend wondering what someone thinks of you is a moment you've stolen from the person who actually deserves to exist. The future version of yourself that already stopped caring. The Stoics understood this 2,000 years ago. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself, not for publication, just for his own damn survival, that you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. He was an emperor, the most powerful man in the civilized world, and he had to remind himself daily that other people's opinions were not his problem. If an emperor needed this lesson, how much more do you? Today, we're not talking about ignoring people as an act of cruelty. We're not discussing the petty revenge of the silent treatment. We're going deeper. We're going to dissect the anatomy of attention, where it comes from, who's been stealing it, and how to take it back so completely that by the time this video ends, the noise of the world will sound exactly like what it is. Background static from a radio station you finally learned to turn off. This is not about becoming cold. This is about becoming selective. There's a difference between a winter that kills everything and a winter that prepares the ground for spring. You're about to learn which one you've been living in. Let me ask you something that might sting. Who owns your mind when you're not looking? Not during your work hours, when you're focused on a deadline. Not during deep conversation, when you're fully present. I'm talking about the in-between moments. The shower, the drive, the 3 minutes before sleep. Whose voice is playing on the radio of your consciousness? If you're like most people, it's not your own. Neuroscience has a term for this. It's called the default mode network, the part of your brain that activates when you're not focused on external tasks. And here's what the research shows. For the average person, the default mode network is dominated by social cognition, worrying about what others think, replaying conversations, anticipating judgment, preparing defenses for criticisms that haven't come. When you're not actively controlling your mind, you're probably living inside someone else's. A 2019 study from Harvard tracked thought patterns throughout the day and found that the average person spends 47% of their waking hours thinking about something other than what they're doing. And the majority of that mind wandering? Social evaluation anxiety. We're not daydreaming about adventures or inventions. We're mentally rehearsing arguments with people who aren't even in the room. This is the wound. This is where you've been bleeding. Here's a concept that changed how I see everything. The spotlight effect. Psychologists Thomas Gilovich and Kenneth Savitsky demonstrated that human beings dramatically overestimate how much others notice and remember about them. In their famous study, they had students wear embarrassing t-shirts into a room full of strangers. The students predicted that half the observers would notice and remember the shirt. The actual number, 23%. You are the main character in your own movie. In everyone else's movie, you're lucky to be an extra who appears for 3 seconds and is never mentioned again. Think about that the next time you're agonizing over something you said 6 months ago. The person you said it to has forgotten. They've had thousands of conversations since then. They've eaten hundreds of meals. They've had their own crises, their own triumphs, their own 3 a.m. panics about things they said. You are not living in their head rent-free. You're squatting in an abandoned building. For the next 24 hours, I want you to do something uncomfortable. Every time you catch yourself thinking about someone else's opinion, every time you modify your behavior based on imagined judgment, I want you to make a physical mark on your arm. not a hard mark, just a small dot with a pen. At the end of the day, count those dots. Most men will have 20, 30, 40 marks. Each one represents a moment you handed someone the keys to your mind. Each one is a transaction where you paid attention currency and received nothing in return. Here's the counterintuitive truth. The people you're worried about aren't worrying about you. They're too busy worrying about themselves. And that's not cruelty. That's just the geometry of consciousness. Every human being is trapped inside their own skull, looking out through their own eyes, filtering reality through their own fears and desires. You are, at best, a supporting character in their story. And supporting characters don't need to carry the emotional weight of the narrative. The ancient Greeks had a word for this realization: ataraxia. It means freedom from disturbance, tranquility of the soul. And they believed it was the highest state a human could achieve, not through wealth, not through status, but through the simple recognition that most of what disturbs us exists only in our interpretation of events, not in the events themselves. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who was born a slave, put it this way: men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them. When someone disrespects you, the disrespect is not the disturbance. Your interpretation that it matters, that it means something about you, that it requires a response, that's the disturbance. And that interpretation, you own it. You created it. You can uncreate it. So if attention is currency and most of us are spending it on people who aren't even thinking about us, the question becomes practical. How do we stop? Not in theory, not as a concept, but in the moment when the insult lands, when the disrespect burns, when every fiber of your being screams for you to react. That's where we're going next. Into the fire. But this time you'll carry a shield. There's a scene in the old samurai literature that haunts me. A young warrior travels to meet a famous master. He's arrogant, skilled with a blade, convinced he's ready for any challenge. When he finds the master sitting quietly in a garden, he draws his sword and demands, "Teach me everything you know." The master doesn't move, doesn't look up, just keeps breathing. The young warrior screams, "Coward, face me." Still nothing. Finally, exhausted and confused, the warrior lowers his sword. The master speaks for the first time. "I have already taught you. I have shown you that a battle requires two participants. If one refuses to engage, the other has no one to fight." This is emotional sovereignty, the recognition that your internal state belongs to you and you alone. No one can make you angry without your permission. No one can make you feel small unless you agree to stand in the shadow they're casting. But let's be honest. That sounds nice in theory and impossible in practice. When someone cuts you off in traffic, you feel the rage rise. When your partner says something cruel, you feel the sting. When a colleague takes credit for your work, you feel the injustice burning in your chest. These aren't choices, they're reflexes. Or are they? Modern neuroscience has discovered something the Stoics knew intuitively. There's a gap between stimulus and response. A tiny window, microseconds wide, where something remarkable happens. In that window, your brain processes the event, assigns meaning to it, and chooses an emotional reaction. The problem is, most people's brains are running on autopilot. The meaning assigned is the meaning learned in childhood, reinforced by culture, never questioned. Someone insults you equals you feel shame or anger. That's the program. But who wrote that program? And more importantly, can you rewrite it? This is a psychological technique backed by hundreds of studies. It's simple in concept, brutal in practice. When an event triggers an emotional response, you consciously choose a different interpretation. Someone insults your work. The automatic program says, "They're right, I'm a fraud." Cognitive reappraisal asks, what else could this be? Maybe they're projecting their own insecurity. Maybe they're trying to provoke a reaction because they feel powerless. Maybe, and this is the hardest one, maybe their opinion simply doesn't matter because they're not qualified to judge. Before you react to anything, force it through these 4 gates. Gate 1. Is it true? Not could it be true or what if it's true? Is it objectively, verifiably true? Most insults fail here immediately. You're a failure. Based on what metric? According to whose standards? That's not a fact. That's an opinion wearing a fact costume. Gate 2. Is it necessary? Even if it's true, does it need to be addressed? Does the universe require your response? Most things don't. Most things can simply pass. Gate 3. Is it kind? Not kind to them, kind to you. Will engaging with this serve your peace? Will it move you toward your goals? Will it make tomorrow better than today? Gate 4. Is it yours? Whose responsibility is this? If it's someone else's emotional state, someone else's problem, someone else's opinion, let them carry it. You have enough weight already. I had a client, let's call him Marcus, who worked in an environment so toxic it would have killed a lesser man. His boss took credit for his ideas. Colleagues spread rumors. Clients treated him like furniture. When he came to me, he was 1 week away from quitting his career entirely. We didn't work on assertiveness. We didn't practice confrontation. We worked on the gap. The next time his boss stole an idea, Marcus felt the familiar rage. But instead of reacting, he paused, just for a breath. And in that pause, he asked himself, what's actually happening here? His boss, he realized, was terrified. Underqualified for his position, constantly afraid of being exposed, grasping for any lifeline. The idea theft wasn't about Marcus at all, it was about survival. And once Marcus saw that, something shifted. The anger didn't disappear, but it transformed. Not into pity, that would be condescending, into understanding. And from understanding came the ability to choose his response, rather than being dragged by it. He stayed at that job for 2 more years, got promoted, and now runs the department. Not because he fought harder, but because he stopped fighting the wrong battles. Here's what emotional sovereignty is not. It's not suppression. Suppression is when you feel the anger and shove it down, pretending it doesn't exist. Suppression creates pressure. Pressure creates explosions. Always. Real sovereignty is processing, letting the emotion rise, acknowledging it, understanding its message, and then releasing it without letting it drive your actions. The anger says, I've been wronged. Fine. Thank you, anger, for the notification. Now we decide what to do, if anything. Men who suppress emotions become volcanoes. Men who process emotions become mountains. Volcanoes erupt and then collapse. Mountains simply remain. For the next month, impose this on every non-emergency situation. You cannot respond to any provocation within 24 hours. If someone insults you, you wait. If someone disrespects you, you wait. If someone pushes every button they can find, you wait. Write down what you would have said. Put it in a drawer. 24 hours later, read it. 90% of the time, you'll be grateful you didn't send it. 8% of the time, you'll realize a calmer, more strategic response is possible. 2% of the time, the rare times when action is actually necessary, you'll respond with precision instead of passion. This single practice changed my life more than any book, any mentor, any seminar, because it revealed the truth. Most of what demands your response doesn't deserve it. But here's where it gets complicated. What about the people who do deserve a response? The enemies who actively work against you? The critics whose words have actual impact? The energy vampires who drain you slowly over years? Ignoring everyone equally isn't wisdom. It's avoidance. The art is knowing who to ignore, when to ignore them, and how to make that silence speak louder than any words could. That's the strategic layer we're adding now. Sun Tzu wrote in The Art of War, "The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting." Most people read this and think about military strategy. They imagine armies maneuvering, sieges avoided, bloodshed prevented. But there's a deeper layer. Sun Tzu is talking about presence. about the power of not engaging, about winning by refusing to play the game your opponent has designed. Let me introduce you to a concept that will rewire how you see every relationship in your life: the scarcity principle. Psychologist Robert Cialdini spent decades studying what makes people say yes, and one of his most powerful findings is this: opportunities seem more valuable when their availability is limited. Things that are rare are desired. Things that are abundant are taken for granted. Apply this to yourself. When you're always available, always responding, always engaging, always present, you become abundant, common, forgettable. But when you're strategically absent, when your attention becomes something people have to earn, you become rare. And rare is always, always desired. The 3 levels of withdrawal. Level 1, physical absence. This is the easiest to understand. You leave the room. You stop attending events. You remove yourself from environments that drain you. Physical absence is necessary, but it's not sufficient. You can be physically absent and still mentally present, still worrying about what's happening without you, still emotionally entangled. Physical absence without mental freedom is just relocation. Level 2, emotional absence. This is harder. You're in the room but not available. Someone tries to pull you into drama and you simply don't go. They try to provoke a reaction and you give them nothing. Not the cold shoulder, that's still a reaction. Genuine emotional absence is when their provocations land on ground so solid they can't take root. I learned this from a mentor who had survived things I can't describe. He told me, "You can't stop people from throwing rocks, but you can stop building houses out of them." Every insult, every criticism, every attempt to wound, these are just rocks. They have no power unless you use them to construct something in your mind. Level 3, strategic absence. This is mastery. You're not absent because you're wounded or hiding. You're absent because you've calculated that your presence in this moment, in this dynamic, would cost more than it's worth. You withdraw as a move, not as a reaction. The strategic absence says, "I have assessed the situation and determined that my attention is better invested elsewhere." It's not defensive. It's not passive-aggressive. It's a cold calculation based on your goals, your energy, your mission. There's a famous story from the world of high-stakes deal-making. A company was trying to acquire a smaller competitor. The negotiations had gone on for months. The smaller company's CEO was exhausted, stressed, desperate to close. The larger company knew this and kept pushing for better terms. Finally, in the middle of a session where the larger company made yet another unreasonable demand, the smaller CEO stood up, closed his laptop, and said, "I think we're done here." He walked out. The larger company's team sat in stunned silence. They'd assumed the smaller CEO needed this deal to survive. They'd built their entire strategy around his desperation, but his withdrawal changed everything. Suddenly, they weren't sure. Maybe he had other options. Maybe they'd miscalculated. 3 days later, they called back. They accepted his original terms. The smaller CEO didn't win through aggression. He didn't win through better arguments. He won by making his attention scarce at the exact moment it mattered most. How do you practice this in daily life? Here's a system. Step 1. Categorize your contacts. Draw 3 circles on a piece of paper. In the innermost circle, put the people who genuinely matter, the ones whose opinions should affect you, whose presence energizes you, whose absence would leave a hole. This circle should have no more than 5 names. 5. The middle circle is for acquaintances, colleagues, people you engage with, but don't let inside your walls. The outer circle is everyone else. The noise, the vampires, the critics, the enemies. Step 2. Allocate attention accordingly. The inner circle gets your presence. They get your time, your energy, your authentic self. The middle circle gets professionalism and courtesy, nothing more. The outer circle gets nothing. Not your anger, not your defense, not even your acknowledgement that they exist. Step 3. Enforce boundaries ruthlessly. When someone from the outer circle tries to pull you into their drama, you don't engage. When someone from the middle circle tries to move into the inner circle without earning it, you don't allow it. When someone from the inner circle betrays your trust, they get demoted immediately. No warnings, no second chances, no explanations. This sounds harsh. It is. But here's what I've learned. Loose boundaries are cruelty disguised as kindness. When you let everyone in, you give no one the deep presence they deserve. Your attention becomes diluted, shallow, meaningless. By guarding your gates fiercely, you make your presence valuable for the people who actually matter. Most men think that being present everywhere makes them powerful. They think visibility equals influence. They're wrong. Visibility without value is just noise. The most powerful people in history, the ones who shaped nations, moved cultures, changed minds, were often the ones you couldn't easily reach. They were behind walls, in studies, surrounded by layers of protection. Their inaccessibility was part of their power. When you're too available, you signal that your time has no value. When you're selectively unavailable, you signal that your time is precious, and people treat precious things differently. But here's where the real test begins. It's easy to withdraw when things are calm. It's easy to be strategic when you're not triggered. The true measure of this work comes in the moment of provocation. When the insult lands, when the disrespect burns, when every cell in your body screams for you to react. How do you maintain your sovereignty in that fire? That's the discipline we're building next. There's a concept in Buddhist psychology called the second arrow. The idea is simple. When something painful happens, you've been hit by the first arrow. The event itself, the insult, the loss, the disappointment. That arrow hurts. There's no denying it. But then, almost immediately, we shoot ourselves with a second arrow. We think, I shouldn't have let that happen. Why does this always happen to me? What will people think? I'm such a failure. This second arrow, our reaction to the reaction, causes more suffering than the first. The first arrow is inevitable. The second arrow is optional. Most men spend their lives bleeding from second arrows. They're not suffering because of what happened. They're suffering because of what they tell themselves about what happened. And here's the part that hurts. You are the one shooting that second arrow. No one else. You're sitting there, wound already bleeding, and you're stabbing yourself again and again with thoughts that don't serve you. The discipline of indifference is learning to drop the bow. When you're provoked, your body doesn't know the difference between a physical threat and a social threat. The same stress chemicals flood your system. The same fight or flight response activates. Your heart rate increases. Your breathing shallows. Your muscles tense. This is biology. You can't stop it from happening. But here's what you can control: what happens next. The untrained man experiences this physiological shift and immediately acts. He speaks, he types, he throws, he hits, he does something, anything to release the pressure. The trained man experiences the same shift and does nothing. He watches it. He feels his heart pounding and says, "Interesting." He notices his jaw clenching and says, "Noted." He observes the urge to react and says, "I see you, but I'm not taking orders from you today." This is not repression. This is witness consciousness, the ability to observe your own experience without being controlled by it. You can't build this discipline in the moment of crisis. You have to train it daily in small ways until it becomes your default setting. Exercise 1. The pause. 3 times a day, at random moments. Stop whatever you're doing. Don't check your phone. Don't reach for distraction. Just pause for 60 seconds. Breathe. Notice what you're feeling. Notice what you're thinking. Don't change anything. Just observe. This builds the muscle of non-reaction. If you can pause for 60 seconds when nothing's happening, you'll be able to pause for 3 seconds when everything's happening. And 3 seconds is often all it takes to choose a different response. Exercise 2. The non-response. Once a day, when someone says something that bothers you, a small criticism, a mild insult, a passive-aggressive comment, deliberately choose not to respond. Not because you're being strategic, not because you're punishing them, just as practice. Let it pass. Watch it go by like a cloud. The first few times, it will feel like dying. You'll be convinced that not responding means you're weak, that you're letting them win, that they'll think they got away with something. None of that is true. They probably won't even notice. And if they do, they'll be confused. Your silence will speak louder than any defense you could have offered. Exercise 3. The gratitude reframe. This is the advanced move. When someone does something that should upset you, find one reason to be grateful for it. Not in a toxic positivity way. Not pretending it didn't happen. Find a genuine reason. Someone criticizes your work? Thank them for the information, even if you discard it. Someone disrespects you? Thank them for revealing who they are so you can adjust your boundaries. Someone tries to provoke you? Thank them for the opportunity to practice your discipline. This reframe doesn't make the event good. It makes you bigger than the event. I have a friend who runs a popular YouTube channel. His content is controversial. He challenges people, pushes buttons, says things that make audiences uncomfortable. Every video brings hundreds of comments. Some supportive, some critical, some genuinely hateful. Early on, he read everything. He responded to critics. He defended himself. He argued with strangers in comment sections at 2 a.m. It was destroying him. Then he learned the discipline of indifference. Now, he has one rule. He never reads comments on the day a video posts. He waits 72 hours. By then, the emotional intensity has passed. The hateful comments are still there, but they don't hit the same way. He can see them for what they are, projections from strangers who don't know him, don't matter to him, and never will. He told me, "Those comments used to feel like attacks on my soul. Now they feel like weather. Sometimes it rains, sometimes it's sunny. But I don't take weather personally." Epictetus opened his Enchiridion with a distinction that will change your life if you let it. Some things are up to us, and some things are not up to us. Our opinions are up to us. Our impulses, desires, aversions. In short, whatever is our own doing. Our bodies are not up to us. Our possessions, reputations, public offices. In short, whatever is not our own doing. The opinions of others are not up to you. You cannot control what people think. You cannot control what they say. You cannot control whether they approve of you, respect you, or even remember you exist. But here's what is up to you: whether you care. And that's the freedom. You don't have to stop people from throwing arrows. You just have to stop catching them. So you've built the fortress. You've learned to pause, to process, to choose your responses. You understand strategic withdrawal and the discipline of indifference. Now we arrive at the final transformation, the point where all of this training crystallizes into something permanent. This is where you move from practicing these principles to becoming the person who embodies them. This is the shift from student to master. There's a moment in every man's life when he realizes he's been living inside a dream. Not literally, of course, but metaphorically. He's been reacting to things that aren't real, fighting battles that don't exist, defending himself against enemies who were never there. He's been a character in a story written by someone else, following a script he never agreed to. And then something shifts. He wakes up. This waking up is what the ancient Greeks called eudaimonia, not happiness, but the state of living in alignment with your true nature. It's what the Buddhists call mindfulness. Seeing things as they are, not as you fear them to be. It's what the Stoics called apatheia, freedom from destructive emotions, not by suppressing them, but by transcending them. And it all comes down to one shift, moving from participant to observer. The participant mindset. The participant believes he's inside the game, Every insult is a hit to his health. Every criticism is a wound. Every disrespect is a loss. He's constantly defending, constantly reacting, constantly exhausted. Because when you're inside the game, you never get a break. The game never stops. The participant checks his phone for validation. He reads between lines for hidden meaning. He rehearses conversations that will never happen. He carries the weight of every interaction, every judgment, every slight. And he wonders why he's tired all the time. The observer mindset. The observer watches the game from slightly above. He's still in the world. He has to eat, work, relate to others. But he's not of the world in the same way. He sees the insults coming and thinks, there's another one. He watches the criticism land and notices without judgment, that one stung a bit. He observes his own reactions with curiosity rather than identification. The observer doesn't stop feeling. That's a common misconception. He feels everything, maybe more deeply than before, but he doesn't become the feeling. The anger passes through him instead of taking up residence. The disappointment visits instead of moving in permanently. This shift is subtle but absolute. It's the difference between being caught in a storm and watching a storm from a house with strong windows. The storm is still there. The wind still blows, but you're not being tossed around by it. How to make the shift? This isn't something you achieve once and keep forever. It's a practice, a muscle, a daily choice. Here's how you build it. Practice 1. Third-person self-talk. When something happens that triggers you, describe it to yourself in the third person. Not, I'm so angry right now. Instead, he's experiencing anger. Interesting. Let's see what that feels like. This small linguistic shift creates distance between you and the emotion. You're still feeling it. You're not dissociating or suppressing, but you're no longer merged with it. You're the sky, not the weather. Practice 2. The river visualization. Imagine your thoughts and emotions as a river. You're sitting on the bank, watching it flow by. Sometimes the river is calm. Sometimes it's raging. Sometimes logs crash into each other. Sometimes debris floats past. Your job is not to stop the river. Your job is not to jump in and swim. Your job is simply to sit on the bank and watch. The river will do what rivers do. You don't have to do anything. Practice 3. The 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique. When you feel yourself getting pulled into reaction, immediately engage your senses. Name 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. This forces your brain out of the reactive loop and into the present moment. And in the present moment, most of the things you were panicking about don't actually exist. Here's the strange thing about becoming the observer. You become more effective in the world, not less. The participant is so busy reacting that he rarely acts with precision. He's constantly putting out fires, defending positions, responding to provocations. His life is a series of reactions strung together. The observer, freed from constant reaction, can finally choose. He can see situations clearly because he's not blinded by his own emotional involvement. He can act strategically because he's not driven by impulse. He can withhold response when withholding serves him and strike when striking serves him. But the choice is his, not the situation's. This is what the samurai meant when they talked about mushin, no mind. Not an empty mind, but a mind free from attachment to outcomes. Free from the clutter of reaction, free to respond with perfect clarity to whatever arises. I want you to imagine something. Picture a day, maybe a month from now, maybe a year, where something happens that would have destroyed your old self. A betrayal, an insult, a public humiliation, and you feel it. You feel the sting, the anger, the urge to react. But instead of reacting, you just breathe. You watch it pass. You go about your day. You sleep well that night. And the next morning, you realize it didn't leave a mark. That day is coming. It's not fantasy. It's the natural result of this practice. Every time you choose observation over reaction, you move closer to that day. And when it comes, you'll realize that the thing you've been building all along wasn't a strategy or a skill or a technique. It was you, the real you, the one who was always there, buried under years of conditioned reaction, waiting to emerge. So where do we go from here? You have the philosophy, the psychology, the strategy, the discipline. You understand attention as currency, emotional sovereignty as protection, strategic withdrawal as power, indifference as freedom, observation as transformation. Now we arrive at the moment of decision. Not more information, not another technique, just a choice. There's a reason this material resonates with you. It's not because you're cruel or cold or trying to manipulate people. It's because you've spent your life bleeding into a world that never asked for your blood. You've given your attention to people who never earned it. You've explained yourself to those committed to misunderstanding. You've chased validation from sources that were always going to run dry. And you're exhausted. I know, because I've been there. I've sat at 3 a.m., replaying conversations, crafting responses I'd never send, burning energy on people who weren't thinking about me at all. I felt the weight of everyone else's expectations, everyone else's judgments, everyone else's drama. I've been the participant, tossed by every wave, convinced that my reactions were my only choice. And then I learned what I've shared with you today. Not all at once, not perfectly, but gradually, through practice, through failure, through the daily choice to observe instead of react. I built something that no one can take from me. Not a skill or a strategy or a technique. A way of being. You can build it too. From this moment forward, you have a choice in every interaction. Not just one choice. Thousands. Every time someone provokes you, you choose. Every time someone disrespects you, you choose. Every time the world throws its endless noise at your walls, you choose. You can choose to react, to defend, to explain, to fight, to prove. That path leads to exhaustion, to the slow bleed of attention, to a life spent responding to stimuli instead of creating meaning. Or you can choose to observe, to pause, to process, to select your response with precision. That path leads to sovereignty, to the conservation of energy, to a life where your actions come from intention rather than reaction. The choice is always yours. No one can make it for you. Not me, not your enemies, not your loved ones, not the voices in your head, just you. Tonight, you leave behind the man who needed everyone to like him, the man who explained himself to people who were never going to understand, the man who gave his attention to anyone who demanded it, regardless of whether they deserved it. That man served you. He got you this far, but he's not equipped for where you're going. Where you're going requires someone different, someone who understands that silence is not emptiness. It's fullness waiting for the right moment to speak. Someone who knows that attention is currency and spends it like a miser with a mission. Someone who has built walls not to keep people out, but to make the invitations that matter actually mean something. You're becoming someone who can't be reached by those who wish you harm, not because you're hiding, but because you're operating on a frequency they can't access. Your peace is not their playground. Your mind is not their territory. Your emotions are not their tools. You're becoming someone who walks into rooms differently, who speaks less and says more, who can be present without being available, engaged without being entangled, warm without being weak, not in the sense of being invulnerable. You'll still feel pain, still experience loss, still face challenges, but in the deeper sense, untouchable, because your core self no longer depends on what happens around you. Untouchable because your peace is generated internally, not borrowed from external approval. Untouchable because you've finally learned that the only person who can truly wound you is the person you see in the mirror, and that person is now on your side. So here's my invitation to you. Not a command, not a requirement, not a test, just an invitation. For the next 7 days, Practice one thing: the pause. Before you react to anything, any message, any comment, any provocation, any perceived slight, pause for 3 breaths. 3 breaths. That's it. Count them. Feel them. Let the space between stimulus and response stretch just a little wider. At the end of 7 days, notice what's changed. Notice how many battles you didn't fight. Notice how much energy you conserved. Notice how much clearer your mind feels. And then decide if you want to keep going. The art of strategic attention is not about controlling others. It's not about manipulating their emotions or winning social games. That's a side effect, not the purpose. The purpose is freedom. Freedom from the endless demand for your attention. Freedom from the tyranny of others' opinions. Freedom from the exhausting performance of proving yourself to people who will never be satisfied. Freedom to finally, fully, completely inhabit your own life. That freedom is available to you right now. Not someday when you've mastered every technique. Not after years of practice. Right now, in this moment, you can choose to stop bleeding. You can put pressure on the wound, you can let it heal, and you can walk forward into a life where your attention is yours again. Precious, protected, and pointed exactly where it belongs. Go forth and be whole.